passe super, l'artiste, super, encore un but sensationnel. That's a brilliant bit of follow-up play by Mahe. Oh my goodness me, what a shot.
Sagosen setter det hen! Han setter den! Vi i semifinale igjen!
Hello and welcome to the Uninformed Handball Hour. We've got Champions League knockout action to come in a while, but we'll be talking about how we got there, talk about the teams, the setup, and it's really the exciting time of the Champions League. We'll also touch on some of the European Championship qualifiers that are coming up later this week, and maybe a little bit on our favorite tournament. As veterans of the Emerging Nations Championship, we'll have to give that tournament some coverage. It's Alex Kulish here, and I'm joined by Chris O'Reilly. How are you doing, Chris?
Alex, can you believe it's 6 years since we were playing 7 matches in 9 days at the IHF Emerging Nations Championship, battling it out against the likes of USA and Nigeria, and putting our legs up against the wall to make sure the blood flowed out of our knees.
Hey, looking back at that was easy compared to what happens over here in the US, the way they play handball here in the US. I just played a tournament in New York which had 4 games in 2 days. 4 games in 2 days. They were 50-minute games, so okay, that deducts a little bit, but no handball player should be playing 4 games in 2 days. That is impossible. There was one team that played 3 games in 1 day, which is just ridiculous. What is it? 7 games in 9 days? Easy.
Don't play the players, as Victor Tomas once led that campaign against the EHF and IHF said. Long forgotten now. But before we go on to the Emerging Nations later on and talking about players and teams that we played against a few years ago, let's talk about the big boys and the Champions League. And the men's Champions League group phase has come to an end. I think we mentioned this a little bit earlier in the season, but now that the group phase has come to an end, I want to get a grade from you, Alex, for how this group phase has been in your mind. This much maligned group phase over the years. How is this one ranked to you?
I have to say it's one of the better ones. Coming into the last game day, there was a lot of jeopardy for teams trying to qualify, for teams trying to get the automatic positions. I would say it's one of the better ones that we've seen, but I still don't really get over the fact that after the kind of international championship, we should be in knockout handball. It feels a little bit weird. It feels a little bit rushed that we get these games thick and fast in January, February, where it didn't feel like they were important just because of the comparison to the World Championship that happened. They're just kind of back in, it's regular games, even though lots of big results happened in that period. I feel the buy-in wasn't quite there. People are still kind of recovering. What could be better is just have a little bit of a break and then a bigger knockout stage, which I say every single time. Knockout handball is the funnest. I still don't love it, but as far as these groups have gone in the past, this was a pretty good one. So B plus.
I was going to say, is that a B plus in your mind? And yes, it is. And it's an interesting take, and I do appreciate that, particularly like the after the highs and the tension of the World Championship. Like the casual fan could then be dragged in even further with a 5-game series in the whatever quarterfinals or last 16 of the Champions League, whereas and that could kind of counteract the argument I had in my mind against going straight into knockout handball, which would be like teams are so different, it feels, after this national team break. Like over the years we've talked about how Barca kind of kick into gear right after these championships and they make their run towards Cologne. teams have to come out of this championship with injuries or with a renewed vigor because of the break that a lot of players had and the fact that teams had a chance to prepare. So we saw, Zagreb make a push of it, Płock drive themselves into a playoff place and stuff like that. So you might argue that, it might be unfair to go straight into a knockout handball. But if you do have that case and then you have a 5-game series to decide who goes through, it'll kind of even itself out in the end. If a team is good enough to go through, they would do so in a 3 or 5-game series. But on that note, then, good look at how the groups ended, and we'll start with the not bloodbath group. We'll save that Group B for a little bit and look at Group A. Veszprém winning that one by a landslide in the end, 24 points to 18, and what really kind of stood out to me, because I don't think we've talked too much about Veszprém since they got hammered by Sporting very early in the season, because that was a real shock result. But since then, they won 10 matches in a row to win the group, and that run finally came to an end, losing to Berlin, which actually didn't really matter in the end.
Yeah, they've kind of been steady Eddie, and not in the fact that their games have been boring. They've had really close games. They've pushed the limit, but they've just been very consistent, and that's very clear of how they won the group so much. But it almost feels like they're a real unit, which is not something that we may have said about Veszprém in the past.
No.
Especially the backcourt feels very socialist. There's everyone gets a bit of playing time. One day it might be Palmerson, one day it might be Kosaratov, another day it's Casado, Sindrich, Sandel, Remily. They're all playing their part in this team, and they have their kind of constant, which is Fabregas, who has been incredible for Veszprém in that run, and has really kind of made a difference. And which is funny because he's leaving them next year, but he's been very good. They're very solid. They play a really fast pace and really decimate teams on the fast break, and that's the simple beauty of handball when you get it right. They're the second highest top scorers in the competition, but they have the most fast break goals in the competition by quite a distance. So they average 4.4 fast break goals, which is higher than Pixelbillion on 3.7 in second. So they play fast pace. They're very steady. Do I still have faith that they're going to win the big game? I don't know.
But that fast break stat is very interesting, considering they're in a group with Sporting, Berlin, and PSG, all who really like to push the counter-attack in different ways, of course, all three teams, but nevertheless. But yeah, it's some descriptive terms that we have not attributed to Veszprém over the years. But I remember even before that hammering against Sporting, which kind of set off this to get 10 games, one in a row, you were very high on the team and the kind of the way that they had been gelled together. A very socialist backcourt is an interesting way to look at it. And, this group of players, Xabi Pascual clearly has a good grip over them, which is maybe the one thing that has been constant with Veszprém over the years, that they haven't had a coach necessarily that has always had a consistent grasp over them. There's been tactically sound coaches, there's been personality driven coaches, there's been former star players, but nobody quite like who they have now, and maybe that has been the difference.
I think you can just clearly see Xavi Pascual's influence, and he's got all of his mates in the squad.
Yeah.
He's got the usual Sindrich and Palmerson to Fabregas, people who know how to play his system, and that has just made them a very difficult team to beat. And while when you look at Veszprém as a club, that's where my feeling of, I don't know if they'll win the big game comes from. But actually, when you look at Xavi Pascual and his record, he's won some big games. He knows how to win big games, and I think he has built a belief into the squad.
And their big game in the quarterfinal will be the winner of Magdeburg versus Dinamo Bucuresti. So it could be another team he knows very well, and Dinamo or Magdeburg, who whenever we say seem to be back on the rise, they lose the next game. So we'll save that for later. But that will be their big game. Sporting snuck into second place with a last gasp equalizer against Płock away from home, just ahead of Berlin and PSG. All three teams finishing on 18 points, which is really nice and kind of feeds into what you were saying about the run in at the end of this group. The big blow for Sporting though is that there's no the injury to Kiko Costa, and the word is that it's a meniscus injury for him, but that he may well be back by the end of the season. It's one of those injuries where you could well time his comeback just in time for the Final Four. But what a return to the Champions League for this team. And when Kiko's injured, then Martin doubled his efforts in that game for sure against Płock. He was everywhere.
Yeah, I think it was huge for Sporting to get that last second equalizer, because the path for them is very smooth. They have Sporting, they're through to the quarterfinals automatically, and they'll play the winner of Nantes versus Wisla Płock. And Nantes themselves are dealing with really significant injuries in terms of Emir Min, who's been phenomenal this season, really one of the best players in the world, kind of flying under the radar, but he's just been there, a phenomenal player, right at the top of the top scorer rankings in both the French League and the Champions League. And then his replacement, Del Bertesh, also picks up a severe knee injury. So two big knee injuries ruling him out for the season.
Have you seen who they've gotten to replace them both?
I haven't actually.
So Roman Lagarde has joined the team, and he was in the squad for their last game against Elborg, though he didn't play. Just 27 years of age, I think. Lagarde, still incredibly young. Yeah, he is astonishingly young for a player who's been around for so long. I think like the thing is he went to Rhein-Neckar Leuven and then just kind of disappeared. But he was bought from PAOK in the south of France, and O'Brien Nieto has joined as a medical joker, the Irishman, which is fantastic. So I think that's going into the Nantes of the late 2010s, which I feel good about. Whether that's going to be enough though to get them into the Final Four, I'm not sure. But yeah, I fully agree that Sporting have been given a good draw there.
It's a good draw, and when you look at where Füchse Berlin have landed, they're playing Kielce in the last 16, which is it is a rejuvenated Kielce team. We can talk about that in a little bit. It's a different team to the bottom team from the other group, and waiting for them in the quarterfinal is Aalborg, who have been really, really good. So they really dodged a bullet, or they earned that dodging of the bullet through the season, and it came down to the wire for both Füchse Berlin, who claimed that win against Spesgrem in the last game, and Sporting, who got an automatic spot. But I do think missing Kiko Costa is going to hurt them a lot. And okay, maybe meniscus injury, that you can maybe come back from that for the Final Four, and that's when they'll really need them. I think not dismissing Nantes and Wisla Płock completely, but I think the Sporting team has enough firepower to challenge those teams. But without him, it's a big loss, because João Gomez, their kind of replacement right back, is okay. He's a good player. It really it's a big piece missing for Sporting.
Yeah.
But hey, they made it. They made it into the quarterfinal. If you asked them at the start of the season if they'll make how they feel about making the quarterfinal, they would have bitten your hand off.
Absolutely. Definitely one of the good stories about this campaign so far. Is there anything else in Group A you want to look at? You touched on Berlin there, who finished in third, and PSG in fourth. Yep, Brodsk sneaking into sixth place. They'll be a tough test against Nantes. They're timing their run like they did a couple of seasons ago with the Czech defense from Xabi Sabate.
Yeah. Wisla Plock. They have, let me just get this exactly right, but they are the best defense by far in the competition, just 26 goals conceded per game.
Wow.
But they are second last in goals scored, just ahead of Eurofarm Pellister with 26.4 goals scored. So their average scoreline is a 26-26 draw, which is how this whole season their whole identity lies in that 26-26 draw. But they keep doing it. Xavi Sabate keeps doing it. They frustrate teams, so I'm not ruling them out. But I do want to talk about PSG a little bit, because actually in the end they finished fourth in the group, but on 18 points, level with the second spot. Actually quite good when you look at it. But despite that, they've landed in a horrific part of the draw with Szeged in the last 16, and then Barcelona waiting for them in the quarterfinal, which is really tough. But this PSG team has no defense. It has zero defense. They have no defenders in their whole squad.
That is genuinely a problem. we talked about this a few weeks ago briefly. But yeah, they are actually, I mean, they're putting in Pelika as a winger in their center block, because they literally have nobody else at the moment. So it's like, the tall guys, we'll put them in there alongside Grabil. So sometimes they have two left wingers in the center block, while Kamil Shipchak still doesn't defend.
Yeah, it's just really like they just have no defenders. Like when you look at their players, you like they're all offense only players, or they need to be taken off for defense. They're talking Randy, who's fine. Just looking at their scores in their last game against Eurofarm Pallister. But give me a ranking, okay? I'm gonna shout out some names, and you give me 1, 2, or 3, depending on how good of a defender they are. 1 is like weakest.
Okay.
2 is fine defender. 3 is good defender. We're not even gonna go cast a higher net than that. But like Randy.
2.
Danny Bynes.
1.5.
1. He's a 1. On any other team, he's getting taken off on defense. Yahya Omar.
2 on a good day.
2 on a good day. Jakob Holm.
1.
Kamil Shipchak.
1.
Luke Steins.
1.
Yeah, Ferran Solé. He's quite good.
Yeah, but a winger. Yeah,
maybe a 3 for a winger.
Yeah.
You got Pelika.
Yeah, 1. When I saw what Potts did to him, he'll never be back in my mind.
Tunnenson.
2 for vibes. Yeah.
Ruben Marchand.
He's a 2.
36-year-old Luka Karabatic.
2. We used to be a 3. Yeah.
Matthew Grabil.
A 2.
And then Noah Narcisse, just for fun. Narcisse.
I've yet to see him play in defense, I'm afraid. I'm going to guess a 1.
So across all of that, they don't have what you would call a good defender in their squad at the moment.
Yeah.
And it shows they've conceded the second most in the competition, the second to Fredericia. And there's no solution for this. They have to run and gun. And coming up against potentially Barcelona, you're done. You're done. But there's no solution for it. We don't know. There is a whole change coming with PSG, but it is a tough hand dealt to Raul Gonzalez in his last season with PSG. Well, it's a squad he built, but
Yeah.
full of little men and big men who can't defend.
Kind of a comparative club in my mind, PSG, with PSG being like the European example, is Melsungen in the Bundesliga, right? Two teams that have thrown cash at their team for years without any kind of real success at the level that they believe they should be at. But now we look at the Melsungen side, and we talked about it a couple of times, how literally every single player you name is a 3 on that list.
Yeah.
Like, loves to defend, will put their body on the line. Whereas PSG, it's simply not there. But they will have Henrik Mulga as an assistant coach
Exactly.
to Stefan Madsen. So whoever's in there, if he has to put himself in there, he will, I'm sure.
might have to.
Yeah.
Might
they are getting Carl Carnat
short-term solution.
and Matteo Marash. So there are two big boys. So it's a start. It's a good start. Last season, they came up against Barcelona, and it was they got a whipping in the first leg in the quarterfinal. I think it's going to be a very, very similar one, but with even less argument as to how PSG could, on a given day, beat Barca. It feels like that. If they get through the Sega test, that it's going to be a bit of a foregone conclusion, that one.
I find PSG games boring now. That the defense is so bad that there's no tactics. It's just run. It's just run and run through gaps, and they're good at it for in attack, terrible in defense, and it just turns into just a mess of a game. And there, like there is teams like Fixer Berlin and Sporting who play fast, but it's more controlled. There's more back and forth. There's kind of foot on the gas, then take it off and, control things. PSG is just, hands off the wheel, free riding on the highway, as fast as you can go, and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah. On to Group B then, the one we called a bloodbath when the draw was made. Definitely turned out that way. When you look at mostly the bottom half of the group, or the bottom 5 in the group in the end. Barca came out on top of this one fairly straightforward, without being exceptional. Aalborg pipping Nantes to second place with a final second draw that they managed to achieve in the last game away from home. Not very good third place. And then Magdeburg flying up into fourth place, kind of salvaging themselves and giving themselves a chance in this season's competition after all, getting ahead of Szeged and Kielce by the skin of their teeth into the playoffs on the same points with Kolsta, whereas Zagreb, their push at the end of the season, fell a fair bit short in the end, last place and 7 points.
So harsh on Kolstad. That's 2 seasons in a row where they've missed out on the playoffs in the last day, last game day, and I feel a little bit sorry for them because they're a good team. They've managed to rally. They have a good squad. There's been so much negative publicity about them, but it's still a Norwegian team that's competing at the highest level in the Champions League, which is, you can't argue that too much. Even the resurgence of Simon Jepsen was not enough, who turned into just the best shooter in world handball for the last couple of games. It wasn't enough to get them through, but it was Kielce who got some players back and just fell over the line into the knockout phase.
And it was, in fact, well, even though it was Kielce who got there ahead of them, it didn't in the end happen on the last day. It actually, I'll have to take you back to the 17th of October, and the final throw of the game between Kolsta and Kielce, where Kolsta had just equalized to make it 32 all, and Artsem Karaluk from the halfway line fired a ball through the defence, and a desperate Torbjörn Bergerud to win the game for Kielce, which in the end would have been the point that brought Kolstad in ahead of them. But Kielce, little did they know back then, that would have been the point that got them through against Kolstad. Kielce, well, they're through now. That's good. They've got their players back. Are they fit? They've got a good month now to figure that one out before they take on Berlin, where I guess they'll be dangerous underdogs, which I think suits them very well.
It definitely does. I still can't get over the fact that they don't have a goalkeeper.
Well,
in terms of this run, that is, if this Kielce team with all its players back had Andy Wolf in goals, we would be talking Final Four contender.
Oh yeah, 100%.
100%. But with Patrick Falak in goals, we're talking next round exit, likely. But let's see. They did beat Wisła Płock in the Polish league. They won 25-24 after quite a run of losing to Wisła Płock in Poland. So they managed to turn the tide there and are back on top of the Polish league. They, Hasan Kada is moving.
He's there,
trucking along. He's scoring goals. He's pretty exciting to see what he's actually capable of. Simon Sichko will be back by the time that last 16 game is played. And
the one time, for a brief moment in time, best left back in the world is back.
Yeah,
on court
at the time. Hey, injuries hamper the best of us.
Hampers all of us. Yeah, no, it is a very kind of solid squad for the rest of it. They do also have Clement Ferlin, who may be back in goal at some point as well. So they do have a third choice. He was injured for the last few weeks, so it could all just click. Maybe, who knows? I think they're gonna do what they can to make life difficult anyway for Berlin. But they did well to get into that top six. Barca with a little bit of a stumble or two along the way, but maybe talking about the kind of the future for them. No Gonzalo Perez de Vargas for the rest of the season, as he got injured with a couple of rounds left to play. We spoke about the injury, or the injury scare that Emil Nielsen suffered early after the World Championship. He was back, but he's not completely on his own, but basically on his own now, because we have Filip Saric. Saric the Junior is in, just 20 years of age, now as the third choice with no Gonzalo Perez de Vargas. And that is a potential worry. I think Emil Nielsen is now at a stage where he can just play on his own. It's not like last season where it's like, good to have Gonzalo Perez de Vargas there. But that is one potential weak point for that team. But overall, they made this group look relatively easy, even with a couple of defeats, which I think in its own way is quite impressive.
Yeah, and Alex Gomez is back, which is big for Barca. He, both defensively and just like the solidity in offense, I think he, as much of a difference as a winger can make, he does. And I think that's good news. They're still, they still have the same weird backcourt setup with refusing to play the playmakers in Makut and Paul Valera, not trusting them and going with the bigger backcourt. But Barca are Barca. I don't think they have as clear a path to a gold again in the Champions League. I think that there's a real chance that any team that makes the Final Four can take them out. But I would say that they're on the path to Final Four, because Szeged seem to have dropped off a little bit. They found some form in the middle of this group stage, and it looked like things were clicking, but they've kind of taken a step back and didn't look too great in their last group game against Magdeburg, where they lost very comfortably, 31-24.
The exception to this last 4 games where they lost 3 of them was the draw against Barca at home, which was quite impressive in itself for them. But that kind of almost highlights how bad the rest of the campaign has been since coming back after the World Championship. Like that draw against Barca at home, but besides that, it was 3 losses, including a home loss to Zagreb. So that does feel like a big drop off for them. But it could also just be a little bit of a indicator of how tough this group was. I think they too will appreciate having a bit of time now to build up to these knockout rounds, where if they do get through PSG, then they will know what they're facing in Barca in the quarterfinal.
Exactly, and you raise a good point, because Zega have had Barca's number this season somehow. They nearly beat them in Barcelona. It was 31-30 to Barca, but it really came down to
and a massive comeback as well in the second half in that game. I remember they were down by
massive comeback. Yeah, there was a 5-goal run from Zaga to bring them back into it, and they really made Barca sweat, and then a draw in the second game. So maybe there is a bit of bogey team for Barca there in Zagreb.
Who would have thought Barca would prefer to play against PSG in the quarterfinal than anyone else? But that is probably the way they're looking at it right now. Aalborg got into that second place in Group B with that draw. Aalborg are a team that are really confusing me this season, Alex. Sometimes I'm really high on them and they're like, this team is fantastic. And then there are other times where it's like, I don't quite get it. It feels like there's a lot of disparity between the lineups, or a little bit of maybe of Vesperum a couple of seasons ago, where they can't quite figure out what the best backcourt trio is and don't stick with it for long enough. They do have Mads Hoxer now back, though, as well, which feels like a big plus. He was in the squad for the game against... And Sander Sagerson is now joining, which probably confuses things even further.
I think it does. I don't know what that means with the likes of Miguel Martins and Alex Blah in there as well, and not those two players not getting as much time as they want, both likely leaving next year. Sander Sagerson's coming in. Who knows what condition, what level he'll be at, but he's definitely not a negative for sure.
He might become a defensive specialist. Who knows for this team? They've got Flach and Monk as left backs and Arnoldson as a shooting playmaker. It's like, great. They don't need him.
They have a great squad.
They really do.
And the rise of Felix Müller as well is a positive for them. I think he's turning into a world-class line player, which we saw in the World Championship. They really believed in him, signing him at the age of 19 from Segerhof, and he's probably gained about 20 or 30 kilos since coming over in pure muscle. So he's a bit of a joker for them, I think, going into this last playoff round. But that it does line up an incredibly tasty potential quarterfinal between Aalborg and Füchse Berlin.
That is probably up there with Magdeburg and Vesperum as like the highlight, I would say, of the quarterfinals. If they make it through, but
I think it's even tastier just because it feels like we haven't seen Aalborg play Füchse Berlin.
It's a Danish derby.
It's Danish derby. We have Matthias Giesel coming back to his homeland to rip apart Aalborg's heart again, as he done with Gauge many times. So there's a real excitement to that game. I think one of the complaints we've had about the Champions League is that you do see the same teams playing a lot, and this one feels brand new. It feels like I can maybe double check if I don't,
I
don't
don't
know
think
if
they haven't played in well, definitely haven't played in the
their
Champions League.
modern iteration. Yeah,
Yeah.
they haven't in since both of them kind of have risen to the top of world
Mhm.
handball. They haven't played, which does feel exciting, and they're both play very exciting brands of handball. So that's so for Fixer Berlin, I'm not exactly sure what to think of this team as well, because they could win both the Bundesliga and the Champions League, and I wouldn't be incredibly surprised. But they could get knocked out in the last 16 and finish third, and I would equally not be too surprised. I don't exactly know how to place them just because of their, I suppose, reliance on a couple of players who continue to impress. Matthias Giesel does what he does. Lasse Anderson's been good, and Tim Freihofer has
Oh
been a
yeah,
revelation for them this season.
the match
Um,
winner
yeah,
at the buzzer against Vesprem and Vesprem, because it's such a thin squad, right? And I mean the one time that uh, like Matthias Gietzel didn't start a game away to Płotsk, it backfired, and it was like a lesson: just never not start. It doesn't matter how many left-handers you have. Um, they even went with the Eisenach / Italy backcourt with 3 left-handers in there and a right-hander for good measure, just trying different things. Yeah, it feels like it could. It's a little bit like Magdeburg a couple of seasons ago. It's like it could go either way in both competitions.
we say it's a thin squad, but actually, it's fully healthy right now, and they seem to be utilizing the full squad a lot more than they have in the past. So I think relative wise for Fuchs Berlin, they're in good shape. Fabian Wiede is playing consistently. Niels Licklein is playing at a high level. Mark Starry is back on the line and defensively, which is really important. And even their kind of their old Potsdam boys of Beneke and Langhoff are becoming solid players, enough so that at least in some of the games in the Bundesliga, they can take a load off the backcourt, stalwarts in Bas Anderson and Itzel and Niels Klein. So it feels like for once that it's not the thinnest squad in the world. And that's a positive for Berlin going into this really, really crucial stretch at the end of the season.
On the third and fourth place teams in Group B, Nantes and Magdeburg, whose position would you rather be in? Which team would you rather be the coach of right now? Injuries galore for both of them, but both with an avenue to the Final Four and a league title.
Probably Nantes have especially since they actually replaced some players. As you mentioned, they're injured players. They have a good overall squad. Magdeburg have 7 players. That's it. One of those players is Felix Klar, who has made a huge difference for them and means that they're still in both competitions. But I think they're their most intriguing team going into this last stretch of the season, because they are full Vardar vibes right now.
Yeah.
They have 3 backcourt players: Weber, Klar, and Lagergren. That's it. They have no one else. They have a couple of wingers and Magnus Ekstrup holding this whole squad together with brute force. But they literally have no one else. And they won't have anyone else. They have 3 really, really good backcourt players missing in Magnussen, Christensen, and Zender. And they're just holding on. We know that they can do it, but it takes one injury, even a twisted ankle, for Felix Star to go out for 2 weeks and their whole season is done. Like, it just takes one. They have no one to rely on, to lean on, and they don't seem to be trying to get any reserves in. We saw Flensburg, for example, in Germany, after they lost their whole kind of right side, they brought in Kopfer and Andreas Holst as, injury jokers or some couple of players to fill the gaps. Magdeburg are refusing to do that, powering on
Do you think
with
that
the power of
means
friendship.
power of friendship? That was the Varda way. Do you think that means they believe that backcourt trio is going to come back? Because if they do at some point this season, then all of a sudden they've got the best backcourt in the Champions League. And then they've also got Mikhail Damgaard as the seventh man.
Oh yeah, sorry, Mikkel Damgaard. I completely ignored him because he's retired. He's gone back to the Danish first division.
He's getting court time now. Take contention
In his mind, though.
Oh yeah, that's true. But yeah, do you think that means that they do fancy the chances of bringing those players back?
Manuel Zender's out for the season because he tore his cruciate ligament, his MCL, and his meniscus in his left knee.
Oh.
So, as Handball World puts it, he's out for several months. But yes. I think we can say
several months per injury in that knee. Unfortunately,
the other two have kind of not been. Magnussen and Christiansen haven't been fit for a long time, with various injuries. Magnussen had an ankle injury, which his timeline was about 3 months, and that happened at the start of December. So there is a chance that he will be back for the run-in. So that's one player back. Zender out for the season, and I believe Christiansen is only out for a couple of weeks. In terms of Christiansen and Magnussen, both players have been injured so much in their careers over the last while that I'm not sure if it's going to be the big kind of the bolstering to the squad that they need.
They will have some backup anyway at some point when it comes to later in the season, but you still prefer to be in Nantes' position right now.
I think so. Maybe that's just because I'd have a lot more fun in Nantes if I was the coach.
Yeah,
the bands are playing, the colors are nice, the arena's full. That'll be a lot of fun. But they do have obviously losing Mean is tough. But Rakovnicek is a fine player, and it just means that players like Brie and Ayab Abdi and Julian Boss will have to take a step up, which they're capable of. It's a big gap, but they are capable of that. And in general, I don't think it's that injury has fully derailed them. It's going to make it a lot more difficult. But
Julien Boss becoming a real Swiss Army knife, played in the right wing, right back, and did very well as a playmaker against Aalborg in that decisive game. So may see a lot more of him in the knockout rounds. Going to talk a little national team handball because it's National Team Week on the men's side. Competitive action all around is EHF Euro 2026 qualifiers coming up, but we want to talk a little IHF Emerging Nations, a tournament that I think only this podcast could truly cover with passion, with two IHF Emerging Nations veterans in ourselves, Alex, and proper handball hipster teams in action here. It's an 8-team competition. It's for the European sides that are not in EHF Euro qualification at the moment, and then a team from Africa, a team from North America, and a team from South America, with being USA and Nigeria and Paraguay being the non-European teams, Azerbaijan, Moldova, Bulgaria, Cyprus, and Great Britain being the European teams.
Powerhouses.
Absolutely.
The powerhouses of world handball, all compiled in Varna, Bulgaria.
Yes.
A great country.
You have some particular trauma with playing handball in Bulgaria, Alex, right?
Ramazan Dona, the Besiktas legend, running through me and my shoulder, but the Turkish doctor, who was also the number one specialist in shoulders in all of Turkey, put it back in and helped me avoid
amputation. Yeah. I mentioned the three non-European teams. Two of them were in action on Tuesday, today, the first day, which is a cracking game. Both of us were watching USA versus Nigeria. USA with a few players who were actually playing in the World Championship a couple of months ago, facing Yusuf Farooq and Nigeria. And Yusuf Farooq didn't play in the first half for Nigeria. Why that is, we're not too sure. Alex, you have a theory.
My theory, and the way that these tournaments tend to go, is that it has a fixed start date, but the arrival of players is quite different, especially players who are playing at a professional level, like Yusuf Farooq. So my theory is he literally landed the morning of that tournament, got a transfer directly from the airport that got him to the game at halftime, where he got on and played the whole second half and instigated a comeback for Nigeria, scored 5 goals in the second half, even though USA were up 7-1 after 5 minutes.
Yeah, 7-1 after 5 minutes. And they kept that 6-goal lead basically for the entirety of the first half, leading by 18-12 at halftime, which basically you think job done. But no, it was a proper nitty-gritty, squeaky bum time second half as Nigeria clawed their way back to get a draw in the end, 31-31, USA requiring a penalty to be scored by Amar Amitovic, who is one of the players who has played in the World Championship before. He scored 10 goals. Drew Donlan, line player for the US, scoring 8. Yeah, they were the two standout players. Paul Murkowski was in goal, another World Championship player. But there was a couple of players, homegrown USA players, who ply their trade still stateside, who you were playing with and against very recently, Alex.
Yeah, exactly. Just, was it last weekend? Or no, about a week ago, playing in a tournament in West Point. Aaron Ham, one of the few homegrown players that has been in the US setup, played with us in Boston. Didn't tell me that he was going to the Emerging Nations, and this was his tournament to really get practice in, which was hilarious because he was coaching the North Carolina team where he's from, and in the last game we did play against North Carolina, and they just man-marked him for the whole game. So they, on purpose, they just made sure that he didn't touch the ball, and he spent the whole game standing in his own half. And it wasn't the fact that that was working. Because we won that game easily, and we're kind of destroying them with the extra space in the backcourt. But they just wanted to stick it to their coach, so he got one less game. And the other one is was it Gary Phillips?
Gary Phillips, yeah, who's a talent that people are particularly excited about, huh?
Yeah. Well, I just think West Point are just an interesting case there. They come in to the military academy, and everyone has to play a sport, and there's a lot of very athletic, talented players who don't want to play the big sports in terms of American football or basketball or whatever. So a lot of them turn to handball. They have 2 teams, and they train 4 times a week. They're really athletic. There's so much potential and talent there, but they just don't really have a coach or anyone who really knows handball. So they end up being a good but not great team, with some talented players. And if anyone wants to go over and train a very talented team in the US, West Point's your place to be.
There you go. And both of those teams, USA and Nigeria, I'd say I'd fancy them to get the job done over Moldova and Azerbaijan, and get into the semi-finals ahead of them. Not very much not the strongest teams in Europe. Probably 2 of the weaker active teams in Europe at the moment, whereas the stronger teams all seem to be over in the other group, where you have Bulgaria, who beat Paraguay comfortably, and Great Britain, who, as we're recording, are currently beating Cyprus 16-13. But I think Great Britain, Cyprus, and Bulgaria seem to play each other every few months nowadays in first round qualification, and generally Great Britain come out on top of the three teams. So yeah, we could see semi-finals and finals among the Brits, the Americans, and we'll throw Nigeria in there as well.
Yeah, it's a fun tournament. I miss those days.
Yes.
It's always fun to compete at that level. Some very good teams, some real class players in there as well, in these tournaments against teams that really have no right being at any level.
Some of the top class players who've graced that tournament in the past have now moved their way up to EHF Euro level. Georgic Govrbadze, one of those in particular, the Georgian, and his team features in the 5 EHF Euro qualifiers you should watch this week. It's crucial games this week, the third and fourth rounds, which means double headers, so teams facing each other back to back, which really is quite crucial in terms of figuring out second place for some of the groups or points towards third place, which, as we know, the top 4 third place teams in the qualifiers all go to the EHF Euros. So very, very open in that regard. And so here are 5 games, I think, at some point over the next days, with matches Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, you should watch. At 5, it's Estonia versus Lithuania. At number 4, the best game of the last EHF Euro, Georgia versus Bosnia-Herzegovina, which Georgia won. At number 3, Italy versus Latvia. Italy, everyone's darling of the World Championship back in January, now hunting an EHF Euro qualification place. At number 2, a game I'll be commentating on Thursday, Austria at home to Germany, which feels like a rare kind of top of the table class, which could actually be really tight and interesting to watch. And at number 1, the doubleheader between Faroe Islands and Netherlands. Netherlands, who, as we know, have absolutely no defence and have no Kai Smits against Faroe Islands, who are looking to make it through to another EHF Euro. Those games all on EHF TV or whatever national broadcasters you can get over the geo block to watch. In particular, the Faroese one is quite easy to access.
You've sold it, Chris. Just a wonderful, wonderful weekend of mediocre international handball. You love to see it.
That's what we're all about. That's pretty much how this podcast got to where it is. Us mediocre international handball. If you want an update on that mediocre international handball, that's what the morning club will be later this week, perhaps.
We haven't forgotten about the Bundesliga or women's handball. So look out for podcasts on those coming up, and especially after the international break, there's some big games in the Bundesliga with Kiel playing Flensburg and Magdeburg playing Füchse Berlin. So we'll preview and review those in the coming weeks. As always, thank you to our Patreon listeners and followers who've stuck with us following the World Championship. Great to have you on board. Thank you and goodbye.